I'm the successful one. You're just a teacher. My sister bragged for years, even announcing it at my dad's retirement party. So I said, just because your husband's rich doesn't mean you're successful. I'm 34 now, and I teach high school English at a public school a few towns over. It's not glamorous. It doesn't pay six figures. And there are days the kids drive me to the brink of madness. But I genuinely love it. I love the books, the conversations, the moment you see a student's eyes light up because something finally clicks. I've always thought success didn't have to look like loud applause or gold watches. But apparently, not everyone in my family shares that view, especially not my older sister, Veronica. If you met her for 5 seconds, you'd know exactly what I mean. Veronica's always had this way of making every room about her. She doesn't enter, she arrives. Hair perfectly curled, designer bag slung just so over her arm. Wedding ring catching the light with every exaggerated hand gesture. She's 2 years older than me, and she's the kind of woman who talks about manifesting wealth and vibrational frequency, but has never held a job longer than a few months. Her real claim to fame is her husband Greg, a mid-level executive at some real estate development firm with a name like Sterling Hawk and Partners. Rich enough that Veronica doesn't need to work, but not so rich that she can actually justify the way she throws his money around like she married into royalty. My parents, especially my dad, have always tiptoed around Veronica. She was the delicate one, the one who needed a little more support. It started in high school when she would cry over B+s and blame her teachers for not liking her vibe. And it only escalated from there. She failed out of her first college, blamed the toxic dorm energy, and took a semester off to find herself in Bali, aka party, with Australian backpackers on my parents' dime. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs, commuting to school, and trying to stretch my meal plan so I could afford books. But despite all that, or maybe because of it, I kept my distance. I figured if I just stayed in my own lane, kept doing what I loved, eventually they'd see the value in it. Or at the very least, leave me alone about it. They didn't. Still, I'd learned to tolerate the jabs over the years, the passive-aggressive comments during holidays, the way Veronica would joke about how I must love being surrounded by hormonal teenagers all day, or how admirable it was that I didn't need material things to be happy. I got good at brushing it off, nodding, smiling, changing the subject. I thought if I didn't give it oxygen, it would burn itself out. Then came Dad's retirement party. It was supposed to be a small gathering, just family and a few of his closest colleagues from the city. He'd spent nearly 4 decades working as an engineer, the kind of man who showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. He didn't care for big shows, so the idea was to keep it simple. My mom rented out a private room at a restaurant he liked, and I volunteered to make a slideshow of his old photos and work projects. I even got a few of his former team members to send in some video messages. It was supposed to be about him. But the moment Veronica walked in 5 minutes late, of course, wearing a backless emerald dress like she was attending the Met Gala, I knew it wouldn't be. She floated into the room, air-kissing everyone, dragging poor Greg behind her like a human credit card. "I'm so sorry we're late," she said to no one in particular. "Traffic was insane. We had to reroute the Tesla through some back roads. Greg didn't the GPS glitch or something. Greg, who always looks like he's on the verge of blinking, helped me in Morse code, nodded mutely." Veronica turned to our dad and gave him a dramatic hug. "Daddy, you look amazing. Retirement is so chic on you." He chuckled awkwardly. "Thanks, pumpkin." I stayed seated sipping my ginger ale and waiting for the evening to settle back into something resembling normal. But as soon as appetizers were served, Veronica began holding court at the table like it was her own farewell tour. "Greg's firm is launching this new complex out in the Hamptons," she said, swirling her wine. "It's going to be like revolutionary. You know, real eco-modern luxury. Honestly, I told him he should hire an influencer to promote it on TikTok. But these corporate types are so behind the curve." I nodded politely. "Sounds high-end." "Oh, totally," she said, turning to one of my dad's coworkers. "And you know, it's funny. People always ask me how I landed such a successful man. I tell them manifesting, darling. I always knew I'd end up with someone powerful. I could never be with someone who just, teaches or something." I felt my face flush, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. "Oh, no offense, Brooks," she added quickly, touching my arm like that would somehow make it better. "You know I admire what you do. It's just not scalable." "Scalable?" I repeated. "Yeah, growth potential, income ceilings. Like, you can't really build wealth that way." I forced a laugh. "I'm not trying to build an empire, Veronica. I just like my job." She gave me that pitying smile, the one she's probably practiced in the mirror. "Of course you do. That's what makes you so grounded." It might have ended there if not for the woman sitting across from us. Her name was Sharon, one of Dad's former project leads. and she'd been quietly observing the whole exchange with the kind of patience only someone who's worked in male-dominated fields for 40 years can muster. I actually read Brooks's short story collection last month, she said suddenly. Really impressive work. Veronica's head turned so fast I thought her neck might snap. You write? She asked. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Yeah, I've been working on a manuscript in my spare time. It's kind of a passion project. Well, passion's great, Veronica said, barely masking her smirk. But is it published? It's actually being published this fall, I said a little more firmly. Got the offer a couple months ago. Sharon chimed in again. It's a solid advance too. I saw the announcement in the industry newsletter. 6 figures, right? I didn't even have time to nod before Veronica reached across the table, grabbed my phone off the placemat, and started tapping into it like she had a right to do that. Excuse me, I said, reaching for it. Relax, she said, waving me off. I just want to see the proof. Everyone exaggerates these things. I mean, if you really got a book deal, there should be… Oh. Her voice stopped dead. She'd opened the email from my agent, the one with the signed contract and payment breakdown. Her eyes scanned the numbers, and her smug little half-smile disappeared like it had been slapped off her face. She blinked, then blinked again, then slowly, carefully set my phone down like it was made of glass. The color drained from her face. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Veronica had absolutely nothing to say. And in that frozen silence with everyone at the table watching, something inside me shifted. She tried to laugh it off. That's the thing about Veronica. She's like one of those inflatable clowns that pop back up no matter how hard you punch them. It's never the full fall, not right away. She reached for her wine glass with a shaky hand, still plastering on that brittle, artificial smile. Well, I guess even teachers get lucky sometimes, she said, her voice just slightly off-pitch. Must have been some kind of niche market thing, right? Like a self-help for students. No, I replied calmly. It's a novel literary fiction, Sharon added. It's actually being talked about for a few awards. Early buzz is strong. Veronica went quiet again. For the first time that evening, she seemed out of her element, like someone had pulled the rug out from under her, and she didn't know where to plant her heels. But her silence didn't last long. It never did. Greg leaned in, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. Well, that's really great, Brooks. Congratulations, man. That's huge. Thanks, Greg, I said. And I meant it. Greg's not a bad guy, just terminally married to the wrong woman. Dinner carried on with awkward energy like a balloon just waiting for someone to press too hard and pop it. Veronica stayed mostly quiet until dessert, but the gears in her head were clearly turning. She kept looking at me like she was trying to solve a math problem she'd failed before. Something didn't compute, and it bothered her deeply. We moved into the presentation I'd made for Dad. The slideshow went over beautifully. Photos from the 80s, videos from his final week on the job, even a short clip of his old college friends roasting him for turning soft in retirement. The whole room laughed. Dad teared up. I could see he was touched, and Mom squeezed his hand. I glanced over and caught Veronica rolling her eyes. Really, she muttered just loud enough for me to hear. Sorry, I asked. She smiled thinly. Nothing. It's just slideshows are so expected, you know, like a Hallmark card. It's what Dad wanted. She shrugged. Sure? Nostalgia's your thing? It fits. And there it was. The backhanded remark. The tone. I took a breath. Let it go. After the slideshow, people started mingling again. The room had thinned a bit. Some coworkers had left. A few relatives were lingering near the dessert table. I stepped outside for some air, mostly to avoid saying something I couldn't take back. That's when I saw her on the patio, phone pressed to her ear, pacing in circles in those ridiculous stiletto heels. He said 6 figures, but that has to be before taxes. And publishing contracts are never paid out all at once. It's not like he's suddenly rich. He's still just a teacher with a fluke book deal. Calm down, Mom. I'm not worried. I mean, it's not like he's actually going to make it. She paused, listening. Then lower. Even if he does, what does that mean? I'm still the one who married into a good family. I don't need a book to prove my worth. He's just trying to feel important. I stepped back inside, quietly, my stomach turning. There's something so uniquely painful about hearing the people who share your blood root against you in real time. Not to your face, not honestly, but in whispers and sideways glances and assumptions made behind closed doors. Later that night, we said our goodbyes. Veronica didn't hug me, just waved and smiled like we were coworkers who barely knew each other. I told my parents I'd call them next week, and I meant it. I wasn't angry, not yet, just tired, drained in that invisible way only family can make you feel. The weeks that followed were strange. At first, there was silence. No text from Veronica, no calls from Mom. But then the group chat lit up one morning with a message from my mother. Mom Brooks, I saw the advance amount on your book. That's quite a surprise, Veronica told me. She said you're handling it responsibly, though. That's good. Me. How did Veronica see the contract, Mom? Oh, she mentioned it slipped out when you showed her something on your phone. Don't be upset. It's just family. I stared at the screen. Something clicked. She hadn't just peeked at my phone during dinner. She'd gone back in later into my email, into my files. Because there's no way my mom would know the exact number unless someone fed it to her. I called her. Veronica told you the exact contract details I asked? Well, she said she saw them. Honey, you should be proud. That kind of money. Mom, I said, keeping my voice level. She read a private email. She opened documents that weren't hers. You think that's okay? There was a pause. She was just curious. It's not like she's going to do anything with it. I hung up, and that's when the real trouble started. 2 days later, I started getting emails from strangers' LinkedIn DMs. A few congrats from people I hadn't spoken to in years. One even asked if I was hiring an assistant now that I was making it big. I was confused until I found the post. Veronica had gone on Facebook, her sacred social soapbox, and written a long, syrupy update about how proud she was of her little brother Brooks, who just landed a massive 6-figure book deal. The post continued. We always knew he was talented, but this just confirms it. From classrooms to book tours, what a glow-up. Don't forget us little people when you're famous. We're already taking bets on whether Oprah calls first. Attached was a screenshot of the contract summary. Redacted, yes, but not well enough. You could still make out the structure, the bullet points, and the total amount before taxes. She'd cropped my email header but forgot to remove the Gmail tab in the screenshot. I stared at the post, nauseated. She made my private career milestone into her moment, like she was the proud parent, the mentor, the reason I'd succeeded. I texted her immediately. Me. Take it down. No response. I called voicemail, so I left a comment. Me. This wasn't yours to share. Please take it down. It got 30 likes in 5 minutes and a dozen responses like, wait, did she post this without asking? And yikes. An hour later, the post vanished. She finally called that evening. Her voice was icy. You embarrassed me in front of my friends. You invaded my privacy. I was celebrating you. You posted a contract screenshot and didn't even ask me. She exhaled dramatically. You've always been so ungrateful. You finally do something noteworthy, and instead of thanking me for helping boost your platform, you shame me publicly. I almost laughed. Helping you, we're using it. I'm your sister Brooks. That means something. Family means you don't humiliate each other over something petty. I hung up again. I didn't trust myself to say anything else. I thought that would be the end of it. She got called out, she backed off. But Veronica never retreats. She regroups. 3 weeks later, my parents invited us both over for dinner. Neutral ground, no drama, they said. Just a simple meal to celebrate Dad's retirement again quietly, this time just us four. I almost said no, but part of me wanted to believe it could be normal again. I should have known better. The moment I walked in, I saw the change, a subtle rearrangement of energy. Mom had set the table with the good plates. Veronica was already seated, sipping wine. Greg was missing, apparently tied up at work. Brooks' mom said with forced cheerfulness, "So glad you made it." "Hey," I said, glancing toward the kitchen. "Something smells good." Veronica stood and came over, arms wide, like we were best friends. "Truce," she asked with a faux innocent smile. "Let's just enjoy tonight. No tension." "Sure," I said, but my gut twisted. We sat, we ate. The small talk flowed like cheap wine, awkward, overfilled, and slightly bitter. Halfway through dessert, Veronica clinked her glass. So she said, smiling too brightly, "We were talking about Brooks's book, and I had an idea." Dad looked confused. "An idea?" She turned to me. "You've got a platform now, buzz visibility, and you're still young. But what you don't have is a long-term strategy. Strategy for what I asked, already bracing. Branding expansion, leveraging the moment. You should be thinking about the next 3 books, speaking engagements, online courses, workshops, monetization." I blinked. "That's not really where I'm at right now." She waved me off. "That's the problem. You're not thinking big enough, but I can help. We could create something together, a platform, maybe even a joint podcast. I've already reserved a domain, the-brooks-effect.com, clean, simple. People love teacher-to-entrepreneur arcs." My stomach dropped. What I bought the domain just in case, and I mocked up a few logos. We could launch by summer. I'd handle PR, obviously. It wasn't even subtle anymore. She'd hijacked my career in her head and was now publicly claiming a stake in it. That was the moment something inside me broke, not loudly, not violently, but with the kind of quiet certainty that only comes when a boundary has been crossed for the last time. I stood slowly. "Where are you going?" Mom asked. I looked directly at Veronica. "You bought a domain in my name using my work without asking. I was trying to help. You don't know how to scale success. You've been poor your whole life." Dad flinched. Mom gasped. I just stared at her and smiled, but not the kind that she expected. Not the polite kind, the kind that says, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." And I hadn't even begun my revenge yet, but I would soon. I didn't storm out of the house. That's what Veronica wanted, a dramatic scene, something she could turn into a story where she was the gracious, misunderstood peacemaker, and I was the unstable, sensitive artist who just couldn't handle success. No, I didn't give her that. I pushed my chair back, calmly dabbed my mouth with a napkin, and said to my parents, "Thanks for dinner." Then I looked straight at my sister and added, "You'll be hearing from my attorney soon." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Brooks," she said, voice laced with mock amusement, "are you seriously threatening legal action over a domain name?" I didn't answer. Just picked up my coat from the back of the chair and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't turn back. But inside, something was burning. It wasn't just about the domain. It was about everything. Every dig, every undermining whisper, every condescending smile at family dinners, every time I let her frame me as the failure so she could play the sparkling, successful sibling. This wasn't just some sibling rivalry. This was a pattern of erasure, a lifelong campaign to make me feel like less. And for a while it worked. I'll be honest, that night wrecked me. I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her words, "You've been poor your whole life." Like success was just a paycheck. Like value was something you could swipe on a platinum Amex. For the next week I went through the motions. I taught my classes. I graded essays. I showed up, but I wasn't really there. My students noticed. I caught one of them whispering, "He seems kind of off lately." I couldn't blame them. The book deal that had once felt like a personal victory now felt tainted. Instead of joy, I felt watched, used. Like even the one thing I'd worked for outside the family's expectations was now something they believed they could take credit for, or worse, control. Veronica had crossed a line, and my parents didn't even flinch. But I didn't spiral, not this time. Because after the silence, after the ache and the shame and the confusion, something else arrived, something quieter, stronger, more patient resolve. You see, I may not have grown up with the loudest voice in the house, but I paid attention. I listened. I learned. And one of the things I learned was that people like Veronica never think the quiet ones are capable of winning. They only pay attention to the drama, not the details. And I'd always been good with details. The first thing I did was call my friend Maya, a former classmate from grad school, who now worked at a boutique intellectual property law firm. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, stranger, don't tell me you're getting sued already." "Worse," I said, "my sister bought a domain name with my name in it and is trying to build a brand off my book deal." There was a pause. "Please tell me you trademarked your author name." I had. It was one of the first things my agent advised me to do after the deal went through. The paperwork had cleared 2 months ago. "Good," Maya said. "Send me the receipts. Let me take a look." 2 days later, she called me back, all business. "So here's the deal. Legally, you've got solid footing. If she's monetizing anything using your registered name, or even attempting to, she's violating both your trademark and your publicity rights. She's claiming it's family." I said that she's just trying to help. Maya snorted. "That argument lasts exactly 30 seconds in a courtroom. Do you want me to send a formal cease and desist?" "Yes," I said, "but not yet. Because I had an idea. Something bigger. But to pull it off, I needed to rebuild not just legally, but personally. For the first time in years, I started prioritizing myself. I turned my phone off for a few days. No social media, no family group chats. I took long walks after school even when it was cold. I found a used bookstore near my apartment and wandered the aisles for hours. I rediscovered the kind of peace that came from not being in reaction mode all the time. I made a playlist. I meditated. I journaled, something I hadn't done since college. At first it felt awkward, like I was pretending to be someone else. But slowly it helped. It made the thoughts less jumbled, the pain less sharp. Then I got back to work. I met with my publisher again and gave them my revised tour plan. I proposed adding a few workshops for young writers, especially in underfunded schools. They loved the idea, said it aligned perfectly with my story and voice. You're not just another debut novelist, my publicist said. You're a teacher and an author. That's a rare combo. We can build something real around that. I nodded. For the first time since the party, I felt excited again. I started preparing presentations. I built a small team, just 2 former students who were now in college, to help with content and logistics. I paid them fairly, gave them mentorship in return. They were sharp, passionate, ready. We launched a quiet blog, no hype, no big splash. Just thoughtful pieces about the writing process. Classroom stories, advice for balancing creativity and burnout. Slowly, it picked up traction. By the time March rolled around, the pre-orders for the book had doubled. A few teacher TikTokers mentioned it. Then a librarian's post went semi-viral. Suddenly, I was getting emails from schools in 3 different states asking if I'd consider speaking to their students. And through it all, I kept my head down. I didn't post passive-aggressive subtweets. I didn't feed the fire. I just kept building. But I wasn't ignoring Veronica. Oh no, I was watching. Because while I was rebuilding, she was spinning out in that slow, unraveling way only narcissists do when they realize the narrative is slipping from their hands. She started posting vague statuses like some people can't handle success in others. Sad. Then there were cryptic Instagram stories, filtered selfies with captions like, "Let them hate. Queens keep shining." But the best part? She tried to launch the website anyway, thebrookseffect.com. It went live on a Tuesday. It had a stock photo header, a pixelated logo, and a paragraph that read like a poorly written LinkedIn bio. Welcome to the Brooks Effect, your new favorite space for lifestyle inspiration, creative writing tips, and entrepreneurial motivation. Brought to you by the sibling team behind one of 2025's most anticipated debut novels. I almost choked on my coffee. She'd listed herself as brand director. She'd even put a fake contact email, brookscoaching@gmail.com, and a booking form. The audacity, the absolute gall. But I didn't react, not publicly. I just forwarded the link to Maya. She replied within minutes. Maya, she really did it. Oh, this is going to be fun. Sending the cease and desist today. Want me to BCC you me? Yes, but give her 48 hours. I want to see what she does first. And that 48 hours, hoo boy. She started to name people I'd worked with, bloggers, librarians, even my publisher's intern, asking if they'd like to be featured on her new site. One of them forwarded the message to me with a note. Did you approve this? I didn't respond. I just waited. Then came the cease and desist. It was a thing of beauty. Precise, unemotional, legal perfection. She didn't respond for 2 days. Then finally I got a text. Veronica, seriously? A cease and desist over a harmless website. You're acting like I stole your identity. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, another one. Veronica, you're being dramatic. I was trying to support your brand. You're not exactly a PR genius, Brooks. Still, I stayed silent. Let her spiral. Let her show her true colors without interference. But I wasn't done. Because this wasn't just about stopping her. It was about reclaiming the space she tried to steal. 2 weeks later, I bought the domain brookshawthorne.com. Simple, clean, my full name. I hired a designer, a student from one of my workshops, and we built a beautiful site. Professional photos, press kit, speaking request form, blog archives, upcoming tour dates, teacher resources. It went live the same week as my book launch, and on the homepage in big bold text, it read, "Built by a teacher, not a brand director." And that was just the beginning. I didn't grow up thinking I'd ever get revenge. That was always Veronica's domain, stealing the spotlight, getting the last word, spinning a narrative to suit her image. For most of my life, I'd been the one who left rooms quietly, who bit my tongue and let things slide. But something changed the day she claimed ownership of my story, then paraded it like it was hers to sell. I think some people mistake revenge for rage. But real revenge, the lasting kind, isn't loud. It's not violent or hasty. It's quiet. It's patient. It's a chess match where you don't flinch even when the queen falls, because you know the king's next. And I had spent my entire life learning how to wait. By the time my website went live and the book tour kicked off, I had already mapped the entire plan. Not out of spite, not to be cruel. But because there comes a point where you stop protecting the people who keep cutting you, even if they share your last name, especially when they weaponize that name against you. The first step was to reclaim my identity publicly. I leaned into the book's success, yes, but I also leaned into me. I gave interviews where I talked about teaching in underfunded schools, about the quiet kids who never got picked first, about how literature gave me a voice when I didn't have one. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't dramatic, I was real. and people responded. Articles started coming out with headlines like, "The teacher who turned his after-school scribbles into a book deal." Brooks Hawthorne is the introvert championing young writers everywhere. I didn't feed these stories. I didn't need to. I just kept showing up quietly, consistent. And in contrast to Veronica's social media hurricane of self-promotion, it made her look desperate. But my favorite moment came about a month into the tour when an interviewer for a regional NPR affiliate asked, "There's been some online buzz around your sister's now-deleted website, The Brooks Effect. Care to comment?" I smiled into the microphone and said, "I think it's always fascinating when people try to attach themselves to a story they didn't write." There was a pause. Then the host chuckled and said, "Fair enough." The next step of the plan wasn't media, it was people. See, if Veronica's superpower was performance, mine had always been connection. I didn't need to impress strangers at dinner parties or wear $600 shoes to feel validated. I built relationships. I mentored. I listened. And now that meant I had allies. Former students, librarians, fellow teachers, independent bookstore owners, people who had no interest in glitz or hype, but who respected hard work and authenticity. One of those people was Dr. Evelyn Tan, a professor I'd met at a teaching conference years ago. She ran a literacy initiative that brought authors into underserved schools for live readings and workshops. When she reached out and asked if I'd headline the program's spring event, I said yes, without hesitation. It wasn't a huge media event, no press releases or flashing lights, just a gym full of kids and folding chairs, half of them pretending not to care until they heard me read a passage that sounded like them. That was real. That was grounding. But I wasn't just doing good for the sake of it. This was still the setup. Because during one of those school visits, a girl came up to me afterward and said my sister's trying to copy me too. She takes credit for stuff I do, but no one believes me. And I looked at her and said, "Then you keep the receipts. One day, you'll show them exactly who you are." The next morning, I started working on a video. It wasn't a vlog, it wasn't clickbait, it was a quiet, beautifully shot, short documentary 5 minutes long. Just me talking about the process of writing the book, teaching full-time while editing late into the night, and the moment I got the email from my agent. I included early drafts rejection emails, photos from my classroom. I ended it by saying, "No one gets to write your story, but you." We posted it on my site and shared it with a few teacher networks. It went viral within 2 days. And that's when I moved to the next phase, the paper trail. I'd been keeping everything. Every text, every screenshot, every voicemail, even the voice memo I'd secretly recorded during that infamous dinner at my parents' house, the one where Veronica admitted to reserving my domain and mocking my lack of scalability. My lawyer Maya helped me compile it into a single legal brief, neatly organized, time-stamped, and annotated. Then I sent it to my publisher. Not to sue Veronica. That wasn't the point. I sent it so they'd know the truth that anything coming from her under my name, or adjacent to my image, was unauthorized. They were grateful. They'd been getting strange emails pitches from someone claiming to be Brooks's branding consultant. They were starting to wonder if I was quietly hiring PR on the side. Nope, just Veronica. So they blocked her IP from the back end of the site. Then they sent her a formal notice, cease and desist. Again, she didn't respond this time. I think she finally started to get it. But just in case she didn't, I took things one step further. I reached out to Greg. Now, Greg and I weren't close. We never had been. But I had something he wanted: stability. Veronica had been spending recklessly for months, throwing elaborate themed parties, ordering high-end photo shoots, claiming she was building an image. And Greg, well, he'd been covering those bills. I invited him to a quiet lunch. Neutral ground, a coffee shop, nothing fancy. He looked tired. "I know why you called," he said before I even ordered. "You do?" "She's out of control," he said, rubbing his temples. "She won't listen to me anymore. She thinks she's, I don't know, a mogul." I nodded. "I'm not here to cause drama. I just want it to stop. All of it. The fake PR, the domain stuff, the branding claims. I want her to understand this is not her story to sell." He leaned back. "You're not the first person she's done this to." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "She used to pretend she ran Greg Jr.'s school fundraiser, took all the credit even though I did most of the organizing. Same with the neighborhood charity gala. She kept saying if her name was attached, people would pay attention." I paused. "So you know this isn't new?" He nodded slowly. "I'm staying with a friend right now," he admitted, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't sign up for this kind of constant drama. I thought I was marrying someone ambitious, not someone obsessed with image theft. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just said if she contacts you asking for money for anything connected to my name, don't give it to her. Please, I'll handle it. He nodded. Then just before we left, he added, "Your book. It's really good, man." I blinked. "You read it." He shrugged. Veronica left a copy on the counter. I started reading it one night when I couldn't sleep. Couldn't put it down. The scene with the student and the locker note hit hard. "Thanks," I said, genuinely moved. "That means a lot." And it did. Because Greg had always been Veronica's silent shadow. But shadows have eyes. When I got home that night, I found an email waiting for me. It was from a producer. She worked with a well-known podcast that focused on family dynamics and personal transformations. She'd seen the viral short doc. She wanted to know if I'd be open to telling my story, not just the book, but the personal journey behind it. Normally, I would have hesitated, but I was done hiding, so I said yes. We recorded a 2-part episode, me sharing my experience growing up in Veronica's shadow, how the book was born out of that quiet pain, and how I finally decided to stop letting her define me. I didn't name her. I didn't have to. The truth doesn't need a spotlight. It glows all on its own. And when the episode dropped, I got dozens of messages. From former students, from teachers, from people I hadn't spoken to in years. But the most surprising, a DM from one of Veronica's old high school friends. She always did think she was the main character. Glad someone finally told the real story. That's when I knew the setup was complete. The stage was built. The audience was watching. And Veronica. She was standing right in the center of it, completely unaware of what was coming next. Because I hadn't just taken back my story, I'd built a platform so sturdy, so grounded in truth that any lie she tried to climb on would crumble beneath her. And now it was finally time. The final move, the revenge. And I was ready. Veronica never saw it coming. That was the most satisfying part. Not the media shift, not the rising sales, not the packed auditoriums full of students who saw me as more than just a teacher. Though all of that helped. No. What made it truly perfect was the fact that when everything collapsed around her, she still didn't understand why. Because she'd spent her entire life underestimating me. The final move began quietly, like everything I'd done up to that point. No fanfare, no announcement, just a few well-placed pieces slid into position with the care of someone who'd spent their entire life studying people like her. People who manipulate, who perform, who pretend to be your biggest supporter until they think you've outgrown your place. After the podcast aired and my book tour wrapped, I started receiving more invitations than I could accept. Speaking engagements, panels, book festivals. But one of the requests stood out. It came from a media production company that specialized in adapting real-life memoirs into limited series. They'd heard about my book and wanted to option the rights. At first, I hesitated. I didn't write the book expecting it to be anything more than a personal story with fictionalized elements. But then I saw the potential, not just for the story, but for what the telling of it could do, the message it could send, the mirror it could hold up to people like Veronica. I signed the deal, and I did it quietly. No big announcement, no public bragging. But I knew she'd hear about it, because I wanted her to. Veronica had this habit: she checked Google alerts with our last name in them. Vanity searches were her hobby. So when the trades picked up the story, award-winning novel, This Side of Quiet being developed for screen, I knew she'd see it within the hour. My phone buzzed exactly 45 minutes after the article dropped. Veronica. "Are you seriously making a show? You didn't even tell us." No congrats. No, we're proud of you. Just a demand. Like she was entitled to be looped into my life, into my success, as if my work was some group project she'd accidentally been assigned to. I didn't respond. She texted again. "Veronica, I'm just saying if the show is about the book and the book is about your life, then you need to talk to me. You know people will ask about the sister." That was the bait. And I let her sit on it. Because what she didn't know, what she never thought to ask, was that I'd already written her out. Not the character, not the story, but her. The role she thought was hers by default reimagined. The toxic performative sister who tried to sabotage the protagonist's independence. A composite character based on several real-life people. The writer's room and I were careful. No direct names, no exact quotes, and most importantly, nothing she could legally touch. And just to be safe, we added a disclaimer before the first page of every script. This story is a work of fiction inspired by true events. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. But I wasn't done. That would have been satisfying enough for most people. But I'd spent too long in her shadow. I wanted a clean end. So I did something that would finally irrevocably cut the cord between us. It started with a quiet letter delivered by certified mail to her condo. Inside was a formal declaration from my attorney signed by me and filed with the proper state records. A legal disassociation of name usage and likeness. Veronica was no longer permitted to use my name, branding, or intellectual property in any personal or professional capacity. No more fake websites. No proud sister posts riding the coattails of my work. No more backstage passes to the life she hadn't helped build. I included a small note handwritten. I hope you find something of your own to be proud of someday. She didn't respond. But Greg did. He called a few days later. Hey, he said quietly. Just wanted to say thank you. For what? For doing what I couldn't, drawing a line. It turns out Veronica had continued to spin even as I was rising. The more traction I gained, the more desperate she became to stay relevant. But as her usual audience began to see through her, she grew volatile. Public tantrums, passive-aggressive posts, eventually even her influencer friends started pulling back. Greg filed for separation a month after that. Apparently, it wasn't just about me. It never is. People like Veronica always leave a trail. Meanwhile, my life was quieter than ever, and somehow fuller. The show went into pre-production. I was invited to sit in on casting sessions. I consulted on scripts. I started working on my second book, a more intimate story set in the same universe as the first, but this time with a clear sense of self. And my parents? At first, they were confused, concerned. Don't you think you're being a bit harsh? My mom asked after the legal letter was delivered. Harsh, I replied. You told me it was just family when she read through my private emails, when she broadcasted my salary, when she tried to monetize me. Silence. I'm not asking you to pick sides, I added, but I'm done pretending this is normal. My dad, to his credit, was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You know, I used to think Veronica needed more support, that she was fragile, but I think I just didn't want to deal with her wrath. I'm sorry for letting that fall on you all those years. It wasn't everything, but it was something. We're not a Hallmark family. We don't do big emotional reconciliations. But that conversation was the first time I felt like my father saw me. Not just the polite, quiet version I showed at dinners. Me. Eventually, Veronica moved cities. Someone said she was starting fresh in Austin or Miami, depending on which cousin you ask. The influencer phase fizzled. The branding attempt stopped. Her name, once so loud in every room, became a whisper. And mine, well, it finally belonged to me. Every email, every headline, every introduction. Brooks Hawthorne, author. Not Veronica's brother, not the teacher, just me. One day, a former student now in her first year at NYU sent me a letter. She'd watched my school visit when she was 16 and told me that seeing someone like me succeed without selling out helped her believe there was room in the world for quiet voices too. I kept that letter in my desk. Because that was the point, wasn't it? Not to be loud, not to be vindictive, but to live a life so real and full that the noise couldn't touch it anymore. And when the show premiered, streaming in 6 languages, adapted with care and depth and heart, I watched the credits roll with a smile. No backstage sabotage, no unwanted guests, no apologies. Just the story I'd written, the one I had lived, the one no one else would ever own again. And for the first time in my life, the silence wasn't empty. It was mine.